Everyone was inspired in that band. Everyone was a star, you know. There wasn't a weakness there, you know. Every single person was strong. And the chemistry of the four people put together was, well, we know what it is now.
It's all about a combination of confidence, having musical capability, but also like just hitting the nail on the head.
I think we used to call it dangerous rock, but I think it's got to be the best rock and roll band of all time. Not only music-wise, Zeppelin 2 is the best rock album that's ever been out, but live shows as well.
The thing about Led Zeppelin is they were enormously professional. It was a very tight ship. When they went on stage, they delivered.
None of us really knew anything about how good we were individually, and that didn't really seem to matter. What mattered was the fact that together we had moments when we earned the big grin.
People always, you know, they try and sort of, they pigeonhole you, like all the heavy metal stuff and all that. You know, if they only listen to the albums, you know, they realise it was never riff after riff after riff.
I just think it relied a lot more on feel and soul. It's supposed to be jarring mechanically, in a way, with a voice flowing over the top of it. So as the music makes right-angled turns here and there, and I keep on just searing over the top.
A pink Cadillac, but don't you be nobody's fool.
The record that made me want to play guitar was Baby Let's Play House, Presley. I thought, you know, I just heard sort of two guitars and a bass and thought, yeah, that's it, I want to be part of it.
Talking about, come on back to meet the little girl so we can play some house. Now we big on back.
A rock and roll band forming at school, and they didn't want a piano player. All they wanted was drums or bass. I thought, I can't get the drums on the bus. Bass looked easy, 4 strings, no chords, easy, so I took up the bass guitar. It was just the obvious influences at the beginning. Scotty Moore, James Burton. And those seemed to be the most, you know, the most sustaining influences. Until one heard sort of Elmore James, B.B. King, people like that.
I've been in blues bands since I was 15 years old, so as naive as it may have been, I was with other people who had a like attitude. So they were thinking and listening to the blues, Big Bill Broonzy, Lead Belly, Sonny Terry, Brownie McGee, a lot of country blues, and then exposed to the city blues of the Howlin' Wolf, Little Walter stuff, you know, Buddy Guy. Yeah, I mean, blues was really had an incredible resurgence in the mid-60s in Britain.
I don't know, I was 14 years old, I think, something like that, when I was at school. That was about the beginning of it. Played in a school pantomime, and then it just sort of materialised from there, you know. Left school and we formed small groups and things like that, you know, and played locally and everything. You'd play anything from the latest hit by the Hollies to sort of, you know, to something by a blues artist. It was that, you know, that sort of thing you've got to do, you know, to survive, really, to play locally anyway. And that was about it then, because we, you know, didn't do any writing or anything in those days. I sort of stretched out a lot more when I started doing studio work. I had to. But you could be doing a film session one night, and then there'd be something like a rock band, and then maybe a folk
1 in the evening. You didn't know what was coming. And I just really had to stretch out on all the different styles, you know.
We do Tom Jones sessions, Kathy Kirby, we used to do Herman's Hermits and all that. I mean, they were never there, you know. We do a whole album in a day. And it was great fun. We had a lot of laughs.
The 4 members of Led Zeppelin individually each of them was very, very, very good at what he did. Now, that doesn't guarantee that when you put 4 people together who are very good at what they do individually, that the combination will work. But good Lord, it jolly well did.
Zeppelin was a hallmark band because they had the perfect elements at the perfect time in the perfect place. Jimmy Page was poised to do something great.
Jonesy called me up and said, "Oh, you're getting a band together." He said, "I'd really like to be part of it." And obviously we knew each other from the session days.
I was moping around the house one day, and my missus said to me, "Will you stop moping around the house? Why don't you join a band or something?" And I said, "I don't know bands I want to join." "Come on, what are you talking about?" She said, "Well, look, I think we can disc." She said, "I've come across this." It said Jimmy Page is forming a group because he just left the Yardbirds. And she said, "Why don't you give him a ring, Oh, right. So I just rang him up and said, "Jim," I said, how are you doing with the group, He said, "Well, I haven't got anybody yet." I said, "Well, if you want a bass player, give me a ring."
I had in my mind exactly what I wanted to try and get together, and then it was just a matter of searching around for the right personnel that could pull it off. By that I mean, for the sort of work that I'd managed to expand around the Yardbirds material, because there was a lot of areas in there for improvisation, and I'd come up with a lot of riffs of my own, and ideas and, passages and movements and things. So my first choice is either Steve Marriott or Terry Reid. Steve Marriott was already involved in something. Terry Reid actually put me on to Robert, and once I heard him sing, I was pretty impressed.
How many more times? Treat me the way that you want to do.
He came to see me, I was playing in a band, and he came up to me and he said, "Where's Robert Plant?" And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I'll come up to see him." I said, "Well, who are you?" And he said, "Jimmy Page." I said, "Who are you then?" I was one of those sort of things. He thought I was the roadie, and I wasn't going to tell him I knew who he was.
Well, you be mad with me, baby. Please.
I wanted somebody who could really belt out the blues and, rock really, but blues, but also be able to handle other, the subtleties as well. So it needed somebody with a really, really good vocal range and power.
Well, I was 19. I was fed up at fixing the roads and working on a Saturday and a Sunday, it was nice to meet anybody. And when I heard him play, it was such a celebration. It was great. He's somebody who could play the blues with an attitude that wasn't just black. It was very much London art school, that kind of attitude, the kind of aggressive, angular thing.
I'll give you all I've got to give.
At the time, I had a couple of drummers in mind, but Robert said, "I know a really good drummer in the Midlands, Bonzo." He was just exactly the type of drummer I was looking for. Eventually, we managed to get the 4 of us into one room, and that was it.
We first played together in a small room in Gerrard Street, in a basement room in what is now Chinatown, and it was just wall-to-wall amplifiers, just Marshalls, sort of. And there was a space for the door, and that was it. And literally, we were just everybody looking at each other. So, what should we play? So there was an old Yardbirds number called "The Train Kept A-Rolling," which Jimmy said, "Well, it's just like it's in E," and you go down, digga, da, down, digga, down, digga. Right, so 3, 4, 5, and wow, the whole room had just exploded, you know. Silly grins and, oh, yeah, this is it, man, yes. You know, it was pretty bloody obvious, actually. it was going to work from the first number.
We were in a tiny weeny room with all this equipment, not really knowing what on earth we'd do and what on earth it would be like, and we just started playing. It was like powerful stuff, you know.
Although I had in mind a very powerful drummer, you know, I wasn't ready for John Bonham. I must say he was beyond the realms of anything that I could possibly have imagined, you know. It was absolutely phenomenal.
So we started under the name of the New Yardbirds, because nobody else would book us under anything else, you know. Oh, who the hell are they? Oh, Jimmy, well, we know Jimmy Page, and we know the Yardbirds. You're going to have to be the New Yardbirds. And, we rehearsed an act, an album, and a tour.
The first album took about 36 hours or something like that. In actual hours. Obviously it wasn't, you know, go in the studio and work for 36 hours. It was over a period. But when it was all added up, it was that, you know, that amount of time. I mean, I knew by the studio bill. But we had actually played these numbers live, because there were a few dates to fulfil from the Yardbirds, and we went over and fulfilled those, and went in and recorded, and then of course we changed the name.
The name Led Zeppelin was coined by Keith Moon, which was originally going to be for a band that recorded a thing called Beck's Bolero, which was Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, Nicky Hopkins, myself and Keith Moon. And then the thought of it all going on the road, I thought, was sort of fairly horrific. Quite a bunch of characters, as you could probably imagine. And so that never came about, but we remembered the name and asked if we could use it.
I had an idea of exactly what I wanted to do with the first album and the band. There's a lot of contrast on the album, and that's one of the things that I really wanted to get together, which I didn't think anyone else was doing, and that was the. But then again, you know, that's the way it shaped up. But fortunately, it shaped up the way that I, you know, hoped it was going to.
A friend came over and he said, "You have to hear this new record by this band Led Zeppelin." And I looked at the cover and I thought, wow, this cover is unbelievable. And we put on the album, and the first track was Good Times, Bad Times. And we could not believe what we were hearing. We never heard anything like that. We never heard a drummer play like that. Bonham's bass drum was unbelievable. The sound of Page's guitars, it was just, we heard about this band. This was a new English supergroup, and we'd heard Cream. We knew about Cream, but when my buddy brought this record over, he says, "You're not going to believe it." It was a moment in time that it got to me.
Cream had just broken up. There are people that say that you know, we took over that position. Because there wasn't too much room about then. I seem to remember. Once Cream had broken up, and suddenly we were left out there, you know. And we came up with the goods, it seems.
And we all knew then that this thing, no matter how it was exposed to people, primarily when you play music, you've got to please yourself. You know, you can't look at the chart or whatever it is and say, I've got to be there for that reason. And we knew this thing that we got here would kind of clear a lot of crap out of the way. It was like a big hammer going.
Robert's not actually credited as writing lyrics on this album because he had a publishing deal that fell over from before. But in fact, that doesn't mean to say he wrote all the lyrics, because he didn't. I wrote quite a lot of lyrics at this point as well.
Oh yeah, I was pretty green, you know. I mean, I didn't know which fork to use when, but who cares? It didn't matter. You know, it was our contribution that counted.
Hey girl, stop what you're doing. Hey girl, you drive me to ruin. I don't know why
but you got a lot, and that's what I want. Communication breakdown, it's always the same. Having a nervous breakdown drive me insane.
What people always get wrong about Zeppelin is they think that specifically Jimmy Page's guitar sound was this huge, mid-rangey, muddy, overdriven guitar sound. And Jimmy Page's guitar sound was opposite, was exactly the other side of that spectrum. That first record, even though it sounds like Jimmy's using a Les Paul, that's a Telecaster that he's using. So Jimmy Page's sound on Communication Breakdown is a very high-endy, trebly, typical Telecaster sound. John Paul Jones' bass part is perfect. What sounds very simple on sort of the chorus bit, communication breakdown, going insane, communication breakdown, driving me insane. John Paul does like this sort of this rambling bass part over that no bass player ever gets right.
Communication breakdown, it's always the same. A nervous breakdown, drive me insane.
On the first tour, people used to say, you know, what's been the biggest influence on your bass playing? You know, and I used to go Motown, and I used to back off, you know, Motown, you know, like real hippies in those days, you know, like Motown was off, out, you know. I said, well, look, honestly, it's the first time you ever heard the bass on a record anyway, you know.
We're looking at the first album, and it's, you know, it's a mixture of, there's blues on it, and there's acoustic music, and you've got Black Mountain Side instrumental, which is finger picking, and then you've got the extension of that type of thing with Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, which starts with the acoustic, but it also has all this, you know, high power accents on it as well, electric accents, and a very dramatic quality, you know. I mean, I still think that holds up, you know. I think they all hold up.
Baby, baby, I'm gonna leave you. I said, baby, baby, I'm really gonna leave you.
Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. I heard that on a Joan Baez album. That's the version that I played to him, but I said, look, I've got an idea of how to do this. And so in other words, I had all the arrangement for that in my head.
I can hear it calling me back home. You know I've got to rumble.
Everything was going and firing off in all directions. There was lots of tangents musically. Well, I started developing the use of my voice to match in with what Jimmy was doing with the guitar, you know. I mean, it's all a long time ago now, but I know that it was quite a moment when we suddenly started phrasing and scatting together on Dazed and Confused.
Dazed Confused came in because Jimmy knew that. I could never get the sequence for years. It kept changing all the time, different parts, and I was never used to that.
The more you try and plan something, the more you're likely to make a mess of it. It's just like you almost have to cleanse yourself almost of all thought and everything, and then you start playing and it starts to gel with everybody else.
Jimmy's violin bow was pretty unbelievable, but Jimmy certainly made it an element in rock music. In fact, it became so identifiable with Jimmy, really, that nobody really ever used it after that.
I used to do anything provided it made the guitar sound different. You know, the funniest thing about all of this bow business is, you know, David McCallum, his father was a session violinist over there, and he's the one who suggested about this bow business. Have you ever tried bowing the guitar? And I said, no, I haven't. I said, well, I don't think it'd be very easy because, you know, like a violin has got an arched neck, so to speak, and an arched bridge. The guitar doesn't, you see. But he said, I'll have a go, and I tried it. And in fact, that was the thing that gave me the idea to do it.
If you just take the bow and rub it flush along a string, there's no sort of friction from an electric guitar string because it's a metal string and there's no surfaces creating friction. It's a smooth surface. You're not going to get any sound. So Jimmy realized that if you turn the bow a little bit and hit the string, if this is the top of the string, and you hit the bow at an angle, that's how you're going to get it to create friction on the very side of the bow. So when he realized that, he was off to the races. And by placing it in different places, over the pickup, near the bridge, closer to the neck, he was able to get those overdriven sounds, those harmonics.
It felt like, I don't know, we just found something that we had to be very careful with this thing that we'd found because we might lose it. But it was remarkable, just the power. And I was very intimidated. I don't know, I mean, maybe I had a complex or maybe I was just neurotic or paranoid or something like that, but I thought, this is all too much. Am I really here? Do I belong in this sketch? And so really the record feels like that for me, for my contribution. But it really, as a collection of tunes and a way to play and expand, it was great.
Well, in England when Led Zeppelin started off, they were playing like not very big venues, you know, the regular sort of R&B, rhythm and blues type venues, you know, the same venues that John Mayall would be playing, you know, or Bloodwind Pig or Fleetwood Mac or Chicken Shack or whatever. Nothing extraordinary. In America, when they started off, they were supporting Vanilla Fudge, who'd had this huge big hit with Inagada Davida, which up to that point in time was Atlantic Records' biggest selling album. But the thing is, here's suddenly Jimmy Page and his band of merry men, and they wiped the floor with these American chaps.
I knew it was really good, what we were doing. Good Lord, I knew it was good. We did a few dates in England, quite a few actually, and I don't know what the undercurrent was, but it was just like, yeah, they're okay. But it wasn't until we got over here and played at, I think it was the Fillmore, that suddenly we went in must have gone in right at the right time.
I remember the first night in San Francisco. Incredible, the atmosphere was unbelievable. And I couldn't believe any of it. I go, what are all these people cheering for? You know? Oh yeah, must be us, I suppose. Ain't nobody else up here, you know.
We only had one guy looking after the band, driving the station wagon. So I did the PA as well. So I had to change the volume of the voice from the stage. So nobody had any idea of whether the voice was loud enough or not. You just took pot luck. And I've heard bootlegs from the from San Francisco, from Fillmore, and it's terrible. It's terrible because I'm still fiddling around with this amplifier with its treble and its bass control thing, which I bought with me from the Band of Joy, which is totally inadequate and probably about as loud as the television set is these days. Well, it was about 150 watts, and now you don't even play without 1,500 watts at a rehearsal, or whatever it is, you know. So, I mean, it must have been a very funny sight. This guy with no shoes on and his wedding suit, pirouetting around, pulling all sorts of funny faces and also controlling the level of his own voice from a box which was placed in front of the bass drum, which was the amplifier. It was great.
I always remember the first review of the first album in Rolling Stone, where they just sort of dismissed it out of hand, completely out. I don't even think the bloke would listen to it and said as much.
Now, the critics were lukewarm, but we played a storm. We had queues right 3 times around the block and stuff like that, playing in small clubs. It was big. It was real hot.
Well, when we started the band, I know what I wanted to do. I wanted to make music which was really that people would respect, and I knew it was good, but I hadn't got the faintest idea that it was ever going to become as big as what it did. Obviously, I mean, but I hadn't even thought or wished it to. I think the only thing I wanted to do was to do something which could stand the test of time.
Is Jimmy Page an amazing guitar player? Yes. Is Jimmy Page an amazing co-songwriter? Yes. Is Jimmy Page one of the best producers in rock and roll ever? Yes. The way that he produced Led Zeppelin is extraordinary, which is one of the reasons that they stand up today, not just because of their individual skills as players, but the way in which Jimmy was able to get that in the recording studio.
The way I like to work is when everything feels right in the studio and the mood of a number, whether it be a driving rock and roll one or an extremely sensitive number, is that sort of raw emotion or that sensitive emotion needs to be captured within the recording. And there's no point in trying like 40 takes to get it right. If it ain't working, you move on to something else and you'll find the next day the number will work fine.
What made Whole Lotta Love great, one, it's an extraordinarily simple song. There are 2 chords in the whole song. It's E and D, and that's the entire song. And the other element of that song that was perfect was Jimmy Page's solo in the middle. Page was the master of those little guitar bits.
The power of Whole Lotta Love, the sexual shenanigans that go into the middle, the coitus non interruptus, is something to behold.
One other element which is unbelievable, and I don't know if this is intentional or not, you hear Bonham and his hi-hat is going, and that's another thing that made Bonzo so great, is that while he was playing a lick, he would keep his hi-hat going in 16th notes during the song, or 8th notes, which is a very difficult thing for a drummer to do, to keep your left foot on a hi-hat, keeping a regular rhythm like that while you're doing something different with your right foot.
Without Bonzo, the band wouldn't have meant anything at all. Sure, I mean, he was the emulsifying agent, he was everything, he was the whole core of the thing. He was the guy who stopped it being just another rock band, really. At least in its performance, the writing. I mean, Jimmy's approach was so unique, and is so unique. But I mean, Bonzo's whole delivery was the thing that made it what it is.
John Bonham is probably the definitive, ultimate rock drummer. he just had this extraordinary right foot, which we hear amazingly on Good Times, Bad Times, that incredible bass drum thing that sounds like he's got a double bass.
I remember Hendrix one night coming up to Bonzo in a club in New York. And in those days, everybody used to jam, and it was a place called Steve Paul's Scene. There was Buddy Miles and Hendrix, Beck. There was loads of us, me, Rod Stewart, people all over the place. And he came over to Bonzo and he said, you know what? He said, you got a foot like a rabbit, because Bonzo's bass drum was so... And we used to take the mickey out of people who used double bass drums, because Bonzo just said, what do you want two for?
If we played some tiny little place like on the first tour or something like that, and we were... one room got so completely destroyed, and it was Bonzo's room, but completely destroyed, that we were waiting to go the next morning in the cars, and there's this long line of people, you know, of different trades, all waiting to get into the room. There's a carpenter and a plumber and a decorator, TV repairman, you know.
Are you a smash over here as well as over there? As much of?
Well, there's more people here. That's so. Therefore, it's it's a proportional difference, really. It's probably the same, but on a different scale here.
Did you expect this kind of appreciation of what you do?
And not to begin with, because
not to this extent.
No.
We knew we were appreciated by the fact that people were coming along to see us in such great, vast numbers, all over the place, England and the continent and wherever. But no one expected this.
I remember that we had to stop a gig in Pittsburgh, I think, once a long time ago. Some of the kids actually had helmets on. That was, the cops were there and the kids are there, and they were all ready for a big fight, you know. I mean, I didn't think they even noticed us up on stage. Then they started into each other and we went, okay, hold it, stop. Will the kids please go back and sit over there, and will the cops please go back and sit over there, and then we can maybe sort of have an evening's entertainment, an evening's music, you know, instead of World War III.
Security-wise, with Led Zeppelin, we never had any barricades. There was no barricades there. You know, the PA was non-existent. Security was non-existent. It was trial and error. Every show was trial and error. But, you know, liability-wise, everybody had to wise up. Promoters, security companies, police, bands themselves, because they hired that venue that night, so it was down to them.
What's the difference between you and the Beatles, as far as your music is concerned?
Well, I don't know. I suppose you'd equate the two by saying that they're both statements of what's going on in the music scene today. But we're completely unlike the Beatles, I would have thought, in our music.
How do you feel about the Beatles?
I think they're great. They've done some fantastic statements.
Have you taken? Have they been in any way kind of the leaders for you, even, or have you emulated in any way?
No, not for myself, not consciously, no. I think they've obviously once heard what they've done, because it was pumped through the media all the time.
I think the fact that they got through to so many millions and millions of people has been an inspiration for every performing group in England, and I should imagine in the world, you know. The fact that they got over so much to so many people.
Do you ever hope to achieve the Order of the Garter and have your predecessor?
What's that, the Kankai?
I don't know. Oh, the MBE.
Oh, that.
Yes.
Oh, no, I think they've given up on the people like us for that, haven't they?
We went to Wales originally because we'd been touring for month after month after month with Zeppelin 1 and 2. And when I was a kid, I used to go to this cottage, which was quite remote. But it was, for us, it was a complete change from what we'd been doing, which was constantly playing all these festivals. So without electricity and without all the trappings and no telephone and no this, that, the other, the whole deal was to have a break and see if we could really stimulate ourselves.
You know, if you've listened to all the albums, you'll be able to listen to something and say, that sounds like Zeppelin, because it's a sound, you know.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, each album is very different. There's a lot of different things on each one.
Yeah.
And I thought 3 was especially different from 1 and 2, which were basically very heavy sort of music. And there's a lot of acoustic stuff on 3.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm gonna tell you. I can't play with you no more. I don't know how I'm gonna do.
From the very beginning of working together, the acoustic guitar had been there, whether it was on Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You or Your Time Is Gonna Come through. So it was no big deal. It was just kind of important to get away from Whole Lotta Love and say, hey, and we also do this.
When we got to about the 3rd, I think, when we started using acoustic, they said, Led Zeppelin had gone acoustic, you know, that changed the style and everything. Everybody forgets there's like 2 acoustic numbers on the first album.
And I think it was a great success, the least successful Led Zeppelin album, and with the critics screaming for our lives and blood, saying, what's this crap? It was probably one of our finest moments.
Initially, the relationship between Led Zeppelin and the press was somewhat strained, or indeed maybe non-existent.
They had this policy that you were God one minute and shit the next, you know, and that's the way that they, you know, to keep the paper going, the controversy and stuff, you know. And in the end I thought, that's a trash, I don't bother to read this.
Do you feel that rock groups have not been given the proper feeling, the proper image by the...
Of course, they've never been allowed to get across. I suppose less so in England, because the media is pretty biased as to rock music. And as far as television coverage and radio, it's virtually swept under the carpet. It's given very bad viewing times, not peak hours at all. So that speaks for itself, really, doesn't it?
We thought what we were doing was right and good, you know, and we felt it was quality music, and we had to. I mean, you got to live by what you believe in. Otherwise, you might just as well forget it. As far as I'm concerned.
I mean, we just did it whatever we wanted to do, and said, look, for us, we had to just weave around wherever it was most appropriate. With amplifiers, without, it doesn't matter. In the desert, on the top of a Welsh mountain, wherever it was, which could be indicative and, you know, it could show what we were all about.
Immigrant Song was a great riff. It was this great sort of octave riff that Page came up with in F sharp. And then that part there was like this ninth, it's like a B9 chord that Page would sort of, he like would pull down on all the strings and create this little effect. It was a great song.
My performance I wasn't that pleased with first and second, but by the third I was being able to sing. I mean, Gallows Pole is one of my favourite tracks, and Immigrant Song is too, you know.
Robert Plant sort of got his Valkyrie song of the screaming Viking, the north wind coming, blowing over the winter hinterland, kind of howls over it. His images were really intriguing, and they were married perfectly to sort of Page's, that dark, winding, melodic kind of chord change he would always tend to write.
Part of my charisma is, is reliant on the other 3, you know, and the same with everybody else, you know. We really get off on playing together. You know? That's the whole secret of... I couldn't really go away and play with anybody else, because if I wanted to play, who else would I need for a drummer but Bonzo, you know? And the same with Jimmy and Jonesy. I don't think it wouldn't be right.
Life on the road with Led Zeppelin was its own world. Whether something like that will ever be repeated is a very large question. I would suggest the answer is in the negative, because Led Zeppelin was a one-off and not to be repeated.
You would have to wake the guys up 3 o'clock, if you could. If you couldn't, you would have to transfer them to a trolley and put them on the plane. And you done what they told you to do. As long as you got them at the show, you're fine. But completely different. You know, they had their own views and you know, they wanted to have a good time, and they did.
Robert, what happened in Perth with the police busting in on you?
Oh, goodness knows. I think they were trying to get a bit of overtime in. I really don't know. I suppose it's the sign of the times, you know.
The worst place he ever played was in Iran. It was a government-sponsored festival, and so we got on. We started playing, got on, say, second number. And suddenly you could see a big arena, we could see the smoke sort of rising. So Robert said, you know, what are you doing out there? I mean, you know, we don't light any fires or anything. I mean, it's just stupid. What are you doing? Come here for music, etc., etc. And suddenly the smoke reached us, and it's not smoke, it's tear gas. And I suddenly look up, and right around the top of the arena, there's you see the glint of all the sort of riot shields and everything. And as soon as everybody realised it was tear gas, the kids pulled out of their pockets wet handkerchiefs. They were ready for this. And put them on, calmly sat back and wanted to hear some more music. That was when the cops charged.
The Zeppelin tours was very dangerous. There was always danger every day. You know, you'd wake up to it, you'd go to bed with it. It was always more sinister.
In what way?
They was gangsters. You know, it was rock and roll gangsters, and it was a different time. It was transition in America. The tour I was on there was when Peter Grant fired all the promoters, because the promoters was taking 90% and giving bands 10%. So Peter stopped that, and the guy was a genius, but it was heavy.
We did the fourth LP. We thought it was what we'd done was okay, but with all the advent of all this nonsense that was going on, it was agreed that it'd be a good idea just to put it out totally with nothing on it whatsoever, nothing, no information at all. It was like, if you put out something with no information on it, well, then it can't be said that it's a hype, because well, if you don't want to buy it, you don't have to. And so it started with one symbol, put one symbol on it, and it was, well, let's have one for each person, we'll choose our own, and that was it. You know, if you look at the basic cardboard of it, there's no sort of Led Zeppelin down the spine or anything like that. That was the reason for it.
I know various retailers in England ended up scribbling on it in biro. LZ4. Can you imagine buying your copy of a record and some record store owners printed on it with a ballpoint pen?
I think albums are the true statement of a group's work, you know? You have time in an album to show or to indicate exactly what you've been up to over a period of time creatively.
The secret of a lot of this is the fact of where it was recorded.
One of the advantages of not working in a recording studio all the time is if you were in an old house, you could find a cupboard that you could stick a guitar amp in, or in Headley, Grange, like the sound which wrote the song really of When the Levee Breaks. That whole song just came from the drum sound. We were doing another song and there was a lot of leakage from the drums, so we set him up in another room, in the hall, and there was one mic. There was two mics on the drums, one at 10 foot and I think one at 20 foot. No bass drum mic. They were both above him up the stairs, basically one hanging on the first floor and one hanging on the second floor, and that was it. And we just started playing. I said, Jesus, will you listen to that sound?
Well, I had my amplifier in another room, and I was in there with him, and so was Jonesy. And that was the first album with the mobile truck.
Bonzo came up with riffs by singing them while he was playing odd drum patterns, and Jonesy would come up with great stuff.
Black Dog was my riff. The first run through was hilarious. So I said, Bonzo, he said, what is that? I said, a 4, I've worked it out. A 4 will go straight the way through it. Keep the faith, and it'll work, you know.
Woman! 26,000 larynxes. Woman!
I guess if we want to say that we lent on something, it could be as far as the structure of it. If you remember Oh Well, where it sort of stops and there's a vocal, that's it. So there you are. Well, in this house, this Headley Grange, there was a old black dog there, and one night it went off because it was really quite old, and one night obviously been off, doing the things that dogs do. And came back and slept all day, and it was quite a powerful image at the time. So we called it Black Dog.
There didn't seem to be a more sensible name for it at the time, because a lot of these things had working titles, which is why I sometimes find it difficult to remember what titles are, because we would record and I would know it as that title, and then I would not listen to it again. The ones we played on stage I would remember, because then they were the new titles and you would be identified by those titles. But some of these things I'd think, well, what was that? Oh yes, Cow and Gate, or something like that, And Black Dog was a working title, and it stuck.
Have you done anything different on your new album?
There's two tracks with acoustic.
Yeah.
Going to California, that's mandolin again and acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
It's just sort of songs that we write and do at the particular time that an album, and we say, right, then we're going to put them in an album ad, and we do the songs that we write in that particular time.
Robert liked people like the Incredible String Band, and he liked Country Joe and the Fish, and he liked the whole American West Coast whimsy, as well as digging Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and the more funky, deep blues stuff. So his lyrics could be a mixture of sort of flowers in your hair isms and suitably placed grunts and orgasmic screaming to enormous effect.
I found that in California, or the Californian musical scene was at least the spearhead or the great indicator of how music should actually have some bearing on, or at least some little pointers and indications on actual social behaviour, if you like, and social awareness. So I came loaded up with that, and Pagey was playing blues and rock and roll, and it was great. If we did nothing else, that was really good.
Once we got to Stairway, that was it. He was in full flight. Not that he hadn't been in full flight beforehand, but that was it. During that whole period, not just Stairway, but it was obvious at that point that he was fully in command there of the lyrics.
There's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold, and she's found the stairway to heaven.
After doing it with Stairway to Heaven, it's a kind of, I've never actually ever got over looking at those lyrics. It's like if I ever went for a job, I'd have to take those lyrics with me to say, yeah, this is what I do.
The idea of what I had there was to start it with this acoustic piece, and then for it to build almost like an adrenaline rush by the end. And so, in fact, it actually gets faster from beginning to end. It increases in tempo. Robert wasn't actually there at the point when I was running it through with Jonesy and Bonzo. He came in once we got it more or less. I know whether he'd been listening outside, but he actually came in and he wrote 60% easy of those words there and then when he actually came in.
Stairway to Heaven, sometimes people regard it as somewhat of a cliche now because it's such a huge song. It is a mega song. It's in the consciousness of a lot of people that don't even like the song. It's in there, burrowing away. It's an amazing piece of music, When Led Zeppelin used to play it live, this was early days of lighters and things, and to see a whole stadium lit up. Now, of course, it sounds so what? But to see a whole stadium lit up as they played that song, it was wonderful.
When we were out touring, and that album hadn't come out, and we played Stairway in the Forum, and we got a standing ovation. I thought, oh, brilliant, because I knew we all knew it was good, but that was like, for somebody to hear a number And at that time, that was quite a long number, you know, and for the first time, it's always difficult hearing music for the first time, isn't it, you know? That's how I knew it was quite something, yeah.
There's a corny word that's used a lot called chemistry. A lot of people use it. It's used in articles, and a lot of people always say it, but this is very true, you know, that we possess, when we walk out onto that stage, an affinity, the four of us, one to each other, that I don't see very often.
At one point, in terms of their audience, in terms of the records they were selling, in terms of the numbers of people they were drawing, were they the biggest band in the world? It's not a competition, but the answer is yes.
Having, you know, been part of music like that, which has stood up to the test of time. I think every musician hopes that their music will hold up, and let alone having been part of a fabulous band as well, and to the bargain, you know, it's wonderful.
I'm very proud that people are so enchanted by it, and I think the way that it is now is that whatever it was that people loved is not going to be spoiled. It captured all the elements of the kind of wondrous music that we'd all been exposed to. I think what we did was we were able to translate and kick on. It's like it's like we were a filter for all the good things, and we made something that was particularly original.